The night I arrived at the Hollow Creek Hotel, the storm was already at its worst. Rain hammered the roof of my car like stones, each drop blurring the windshield until the world outside turned into nothing but streaks of black and silver. My wipers worked furiously, but they could hardly keep up. Headlights caught only glimpses of the narrow road ahead, tall skeletal trees bending in the wind, the shine of wet asphalt, the flash of water rushing across low dips in the pavement. I'd been driving for hours, far longer than I'd planned. I had taken the wrong turn somewhere off the main highway, and every attempt to double back only seemed to drag me deeper into unfamiliar countryside. My phone had lost its signal an hour ago, and my gas gauge hovered just above empty. When I finally saw a faint red glow through the sheets of rain, I thought I was imagining it. As I drew closer, the glow took shape, an old neon sign, half dead, buzzing faintly against the storm. The letters flickered, some gone entirely, so that it didn't read Hollow Creek Hotel the way it must have long ago. Instead, it stuttered in broken pieces. Howl. Cree. Hot. Fitting, I thought. The kind of place you found in ghost stories, not in travel brochures. But my options were limited. My tank was running low, the storm was brutal, and the roads behind me were a maze I wasn't confident I could retrace. With no better choice, I turned into the cracked parking lot. The building loomed above me, 3 stories tall, its brick walls darkened with age and rain. Shutters banged loosely against the windows, and vines crept high along the foundation. The place looked abandoned, yet a faint light glowed behind the curtains of the lobby. I grabbed my suitcase and sprinted for the entrance, boots splashing through shallow puddles. The heavy wooden doors resisted when I pulled, swollen with damp and warped by time. But at last, they gave way with a groan that echoed through the empty night. Inside, the air was colder than I expected, damp, stale, with the sour scent of mildew, and something sharper beneath it, metallic, rust maybe, or blood, though I told myself that was just nerves. The lobby stretched out in faded grandeur. Once it must have been beautiful. A high ceiling arched overhead, from which a chandelier still dangled, its crystals dulled with dust. The wallpaper, patterned in gold swirls, peeled at the edges and bubbled in spots where water had seeped through. A grandfather clock stood in one corner, its pendulum swinging unevenly, the tick-tock, tick, just slightly off rhythm. Behind the front desk sat a man. His shoulders slumped forward, his pale face sagging with age and exhaustion. At first I thought he was asleep, but when I set my suitcase down, he stirred, blinking watery gray eyes. Checking in, his voice rasped like dry paper, brittle and strained. "Yes," I said, shaking rainwater from my jacket. "Just for the night. I lost the highway, and with the storm—" "You'll want a room," he cut me off. Not unkindly, but as though the ritual of conversation was too heavy a burden. He reached under the counter and slid out a thick leather book, its spine cracked, its pages yellowed with decades of use. "Sign your name." I obeyed. The pen scratched across the page. My name joined a list of others, some written boldly, some barely legible, many faded with age. I noticed the last entry was from weeks ago, maybe months. As I set the pen down, the old man reached for the wall behind him, where a row of tarnished brass keys hung on hooks. His hand drifted, stopped over one in particular, room 6, then twitched back. He hesitated, his lips tightening, before quickly snatching a different key instead. He placed it in my palm. "Room 9, top of the stairs, end of the hall." "Thanks," I said. I tried for a smile. "Are there, many guests here tonight?" The man's eyes flicked toward me, sharp despite the weariness in his face. Then he shook his head slowly. "Not many travelers come through Hollow Creek anymore." He said nothing else. No welcome, no instructions, no offer of amenities. Just silence. The lobby around me seemed to lean into that silence. I heard no chatter, no televisions, no footsteps from other guests. Just the storm battering the windows and the too slow tick of the grandfather clock. I switched off the lamp and lay back, telling myself I needed rest, that everything strange had an explanation. Old buildings groaned, the wind made odd noises, imagination filled in the rest. But just as my eyes closed, I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. 3 knocks, slow, deliberate. From the hallway, right outside my door. I sat upright in bed, my heart hammering against my ribs. The room was pitch dark except for a pale wash of moonlight slipping through the thin curtains. My ears strained against the silence, waiting. The knocks did not come again. For a long time I sat perfectly still, staring at the door. Every creak of the old building set my nerves on edge. The groan of wood in the walls, the hiss of wind against the glass. But nothing followed. No footsteps, no voices, just quiet. I told myself it had been the storm, or maybe my imagination twisting the sounds of rain and wind. Yet even as I tried to reason it away, a cold certainty settled in my gut. Someone or something had been right outside my door. Finally, I forced myself to move. I got out of bed and crept across the carpet, every step exaggerated in the stillness. My hand hovered over the doorknob. I pressed my ear against the wood. Nothing. I waited, counting heartbeats. Still nothing. Then slowly I turned the lock and cracked the door open. The hallway stretched ahead in its dim, flickering glow, empty and silent. The air out there was colder than in my room, and it smelled faintly of damp earth, as though the storm had somehow seeped through the very walls. Then I saw it, something lying on the floor just beyond the threshold. A folded slip of paper. I bent down, my hand trembling slightly as I picked it up. The paper was yellowed, edges frayed as though it had been handled many times before. My stomach tightened as I unfolded it. The writing was scrawled in uneven black ink, hurried, almost desperate. "Don't open the door. Don't listen to her. Stay away from room 6. I read the words twice, 3 times, my throat tightening with each pass. The handwriting trailed off at the end, the ink smudged as though the writer's hand had been shaking. I glanced up and down the hall, but it was deserted. Whoever had left this note was gone. A part of me wanted to march straight back to the front desk, demand an explanation from the old man downstairs. But another part, stronger, louder, told me not to. Some instinct I couldn't explain said that drawing attention to myself, asking questions, might only make things worse. Instead, I retreated back into my room, shutting and locking the door behind me. My hands shook as I set the note on the nightstand. For hours I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the words burning in my mind. Don't open the door. Don't listen to her. Stay away from room 6. At some point, exhaustion must have dragged me under, but even in sleep, I wasn't safe. The dream began in the hallway. I was standing before room 6, staring at the chained door. The scratches around the handle gleamed fresh in the light, deep and raw, as if carved only moments ago. From behind the door came a whisper. "Help me." The voice was soft, feminine, trembling with fear. "Please," it begged. "They locked me in. I can't get out. You have to help me. I reached for the chains. My hands shook as I began to undo them, one by one. But as I worked, the voice shifted. The trembling plea smoothed out, losing its desperation. The tone grew lower, thicker. Almost there, it said. Something in me knew I should stop, that whatever was speaking was not what it pretended to be. But my hands moved on their own, undoing the final lock. The door creaked open. Darkness poured out, not just shadows, but a blackness so thick it seemed to swallow the hallway whole. And within that darkness, two pale hands reached forward, clawed fingers curling around the doorframe. I woke with a scream lodged in my throat. For a moment, I didn't know where I was. The room was dark, the storm outside still raging. My body was drenched in sweat, heart pounding so hard it hurt. But the worst part was the sound. The voice from the dream hadn't faded. It was here. "Help me," a woman's whisper muffled through the wall. I sat frozen in bed, staring at the wall that separated my room from room 6. The voice came again, clearer this time. "Please, I'm trapped. You can hear me, can't you?" I clutched the sheets, my mouth dry. The note's words screamed in my mind. Don't listen to her. "I know you can hear me," the voice continued, soft and coaxing. "Please, just talk to me. I'm so alone in here." My jaw clenched. I forced myself to stay silent. Minutes passed. The voice didn't stop. Sometimes it sobbed. Sometimes it pleaded. Sometimes it grew angry, snapping with sharp impatience. "Why won't you answer me? Don't you care? You're cruel. You're just like them." Each word sliced deeper, burrowing into my thoughts. I pressed my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The voice was inside my head now, slipping between my defenses. And then, just as suddenly, it stopped. The silence was worse. I sat in the dark, shaking, waiting for it to return. That was when I heard it. The sound of something dragging down the hallway. Slow, scraping steps, as though bare feet slid across the carpet. The steps grew louder, closer, pausing now and then continuing. My entire body locked up. They stopped right outside my door. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, tap, tap, tap. 3 knocks, the same as before. My body screamed to move, to do something, but terror pinned me in place. And then, a whisper, so close it could have been on the other side of the door. "Let me in." I bit my tongue to keep from crying out. My hands clutched the sheets so tightly my knuckles ached. The knob rattled violently. For several long seconds it shook, as if someone or something was trying to wrench it open. I squeezed my eyes shut, whispering to myself, "It's not real, it's not real, it's not real." And then, silence. When I opened my eyes, the room was still, the knob was still. The only sound was the storm outside. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. At dawn, pale gray light crept through the curtains. Somehow, I had survived the night. But when I went to leave my room, I found something waiting at my door. Another note. This one was written in the same shaky hand as the first. The letters leaned forward, as if written in haste, the ink darker, fresher. She knows you're here. By the time the gray light of dawn crept through the curtains, I was already dressed, suitcase packed, key in hand. Every nerve in me screamed to leave, to drive, to get away from this place, to never look back. But when I opened the door and saw the fresh note on the floor, my knees almost buckled. She knows you're here. The words stared up at me in their jagged ink. For a moment, I just stood there, the paper trembling in my grip. Then I shoved it into my pocket, grabbed my suitcase, and marched down the hallway. The hotel was silent except for the faint buzz of the flickering sconces. The air felt heavier than it had the night before, as though the building itself were holding its breath. I passed room 6 without meaning to look, but my eyes betrayed me. The door was the same, chains wrapped tight, bolts locked in place. Yet I swore I saw the knob twitch, just slightly, as I hurried by. The lobby was dim, lit by a weak lamp behind the desk. The old man sat there as before, hunched over, his lined face slack with fatigue. For a terrifying moment, I thought he might be dead until he blinked and lifted his gaze. "Checking out?" His voice cracked in the stillness. "Yes," I said, louder than I meant to. "Something's wrong with this place. Last night—" I stopped myself. What was I supposed to say? That I'd heard whispers through the walls? That something had knocked at my door? That I received notes warning me about a room that shouldn't have anyone inside? The old man's eyes narrowed slightly. "You heard her." My mouth went dry. "Who?" He didn't answer right away. His gaze drifted past me, toward the staircase that led back up to the rooms. His jaw tightened. When he finally spoke, his words were low, deliberate. "You should leave tonight, before it gets worse." A chill ran through me. "So, it's true. There's someone in room 6? His head snapped toward me. "Don't say that," he hissed. His voice carried a sharpness I hadn't heard before, like the crack of breaking glass. The lobby fell silent. Even the storm outside seemed to have gone quiet. After a long moment, he slumped again, shoulders sagging. "Room 6 should have been sealed off years ago. Should have been bricked over, burned down. But the owners, they don't believe. They never stayed here long enough to understand." I leaned closer, lowering my voice. "Understand what?" He hesitated, his hands twisted together on the counter, thin skin stretched tight over knotted knuckles. At last he spoke. "There was a woman, back when the hotel was still alive, back when people came from all over. She stayed here often, always the same room, room 6. I swallowed, my pulse quickening. "They say she came here with a man," he said. "A man who wasn't her husband. They say the two of them quarreled. No one knows for certain how it started. Only that one night people heard screaming, then silence. In the morning—" He trailed off, his gaze had drifted again, fixed on nothing. "In the morning," he whispered, "they found her in the bathtub. The water had gone cold. Her wrists were open. The man was gone." The words sank like stones into my chest. I shivered despite the warmth of the lobby lamp. "Suicide?" I asked. His eyes flicked to mine, sharp. "That's what they wrote in the papers. That's what they told themselves." His voice dropped lower. "But I've worked here 40 years. I've seen things. She didn't leave this place. She never left." I wanted to ask what he meant, but the words tangled in my throat. Instead, I whispered, "The voice." His lips pressed thin. He gave the smallest nod. "She wants company. She always wants company." I felt the note in my pocket. The jagged handwriting burned into my mind. Don't listen to her. Whoever had left it knew the truth. "I need to leave," I said, my voice shaking. The old man's gaze softened. For the first time I thought I saw pity in his tired eyes. "Then go," he said, "while you still can. Once she takes notice." His words trailed, unfinished but heavy with warning. I turned toward the door, suitcase clutched tight, adrenaline urging me forward. But when I reached the handle, something stopped me. The storm. It hadn't let up all night, and now the morning revealed just how bad it had gotten. Sheets of rain still pounded the glass, and the road outside was barely visible under a swollen river of water. Tree limbs littered the parking lot. The old neon sign flickered weakly, half drowned in the downpour. "The highway's washed out," the old man said quietly behind me. "You'll never make it far. Not today." My stomach dropped. "You mean I have to stay?" He gave a slow, reluctant nod. "One more night maybe. 2, until the road's clear." A fresh wave of dread rolled through me. One more night in this place. One more night with the thing in room 6. I turned back toward the desk. Who left the notes? For the first time, the old man's mask slipped. Fear flashed across his face. "I don't know," he said quickly, too quickly. But I could tell he was lying. Before I could press him, the clock in the corner chimed, its uneven toll filling the lobby. The old man flinched at the sound, as though the clock itself unsettled him. "That's enough talk," he muttered, lowering his gaze. "Go back to your room. Stay quiet. Don't open the door. Not for anything." I wanted to shout, to demand answers, to beg for help, but the look in his eyes silenced me. A look that said, "Some things are safer left unspoken." I turned away, dragging my suitcase back toward the stairs. Each step felt heavier than the last. As I reached the landing, I glanced back one final time. The old man was still at the desk, but his eyes weren't on me. They were fixed on the dark hallway upstairs, on room 6. I told myself I'd spend the day in town, that if I could just get away from the hotel, maybe I'd be able to breathe again. But the rain never let up. By afternoon, the parking lot was a shallow lake, water lapping at the tires of my car. The highway was still a rushing river, brown with mud and debris. I was trapped. The hours dragged. I sat in the lobby for a while, pretending to read an old magazine, but my eyes never moved across the words. Every creak in the floor above, every groan in the walls made me flinch. The old man barely looked up from behind the desk. If anything, he seemed more withdrawn than before, shrinking into himself, as if trying to disappear. By late evening, I couldn't avoid it any longer. I had to return to my room. The hallway upstairs was darker than usual, as though the weak bulbs had grown tired. My footsteps echoed too loudly against the threadbare carpet. When I passed room 6, I didn't mean to look, but I did. The chains were different. They weren't hanging the way I remembered. They were tighter, pulled across the door at an odd angle, as though someone had unfastened them and then quickly locked them again. The knob twitched. Just once. I hurried down the hall to my room, heart pounding. Once inside, I locked the door and threw the bolt across, shoving the chair from the desk up against it. I told myself it was just precaution, just nerves. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't be enough. I tried to sleep early, hoping to avoid whatever might come. But sleep doesn't obey logic. It crept in slowly, pulling me under despite my best efforts. When I woke, it was to a sound that turned my blood to ice. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It came from the wall beside my bed, the wall that connected to room 6. Long, deliberate strokes, like fingernails dragging across the plaster. I sat up, holding my breath. The sound stopped. Then it came again, louder, closer. Scratch, scratch, scratch. I pressed my palm against the wall. It was cold, too cold. The air seemed to seep through it, damp and heavy, smelling faintly of rot. And then came the whisper. "You can hear me." My stomach turned. "You know I'm here. You know I'm real." I yanked my hand back, stumbling away from the wall. "Talk to me," the voice begged, softer now. "Please, I'm so lonely. Just one word, that's all." I clenched my jaw, remembering the warning. Don't listen to her. But it was hard, so hard. Her voice wasn't angry this time. It was broken, trembling, heavy with sadness. "Why won't you?" she whispered. "Why won't anyone?" The scratching stopped. For a moment, silence stretched thin across the room. Then the sound shifted. Not scratching now, tapping. From the inside of the wall, like knuckles rapping gently, insistently. I backed toward the window. And then, as if the wall itself had grown teeth, a loud, jagged gouge tore through the plaster. White dust rained down onto the carpet. I froze, horror locking me in place. The gouge deepened, widening, until I could see it, an actual crack splitting across the wall, jagged like a wound. From the darkness of that crack, something pale pressed through. Not a hand, not fully, just fingertips, thin, bone white, straining through the gap, nails digging grooves into the plaster as they reached. I screamed, stumbling back against the bed. The fingertips twitched, curling as if grasping for me. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the crack snapped shut. The wall was whole again, as though nothing had happened. But the marks remained. 4 long, dark scratches carved deep into the plaster. I didn't sleep after that. I sat in the chair by the window, staring at the wall, heart hammering. Every gust of wind against the glass made me flinch. Hours crawled by. Around 3 a.m, I heard it again. The dragging steps in the hallway, slow, uneven, sliding across the carpet. They stopped outside my door. I gripped the arms of the chair, paralyzed. The knob rattled, harder this time, jerking violently back and forth. "Let me in." The whisper seeped through the door, low and furious. "I know you hear me. I know you're awake." The chair against the door trembled with the force of the knob shaking. "Open it!" The voice shrieked now, shrill and jagged, a sound that didn't belong to any living throat. My ears rang with it, my body rigid with terror. And then, silence. I sat frozen for what felt like hours, waiting. Finally, I dared to breathe. That was when I saw it. Something scrawled on the inside of my window. The glass was fogged from the storm, and across it, written in a finger smear, were words. "She won't stop." I lunged forward, wiping the glass, but the words didn't vanish. They were written into the condensation itself, dripping slowly down the pane. A sob clawed at my throat. Whoever had been leaving the notes before, they weren't outside my door anymore. They were here, in my room. The night dragged on in unbearable silence. When morning finally came, I opened the curtains, desperate for light. But the storm hadn't broken. The sky was black, rain pelting down harder than ever. The road outside looked worse, if anything, a churning river cutting me off from escape. Exhausted, I stumbled down to the lobby, clutching the latest note in my shaking hand. The old man was there, hunched at the desk as always, but his face paled when he saw me. "She's getting stronger," he whispered before I could speak. I slammed the note on the counter. "Who's leaving these? Who else knows about her?" The old man shook his head quickly, eyes darting around the lobby. "Don't ask. Don't draw her in. She listens." "Listens," I voice cracked. "She was in my room last night." He flinched as though I'd cursed aloud. "You have to endure it until the road's open. You can't fight her." I leaned closer, desperate. "Then tell me what she wants." The old man's gaze was hollow. "She wants you to open the door." That night, I didn't bother pretending. I dragged the dresser against the door, shoved the chair beneath the knob, even wedged the suitcase against the frame. Still, I knew it wouldn't matter, because the thing in room 6 didn't need doors anymore, and she was getting closer. Morning came heavy and gray, though I hadn't really slept. Every time my eyes shut, I felt that whisper curl around me, soft and poisonous. "Let me in." I left the barricade at the door and stumbled downstairs, desperate for answers. The old man was behind the desk, as always, but something about him was different this time. He looked more fragile, as though the storm had drained him too. His hands trembled slightly as he lifted a cup of coffee to his lips. I slammed the latest note onto the counter. "She won't stop." His eyes flicked to it, then to me. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, in a voice rasped low with exhaustion, he muttered, "She never does." I leaned closer. "Tell me the truth. All of it. Who was she? What happened in room 6? The old man's gaze dropped. He rubbed his temples as though even speaking her story might summon her. Finally, he sighed. "Her name was Evelyn. She came here every month, always the same weekend. People said she was beautiful in that fragile way. Pale skin, dark hair, the kind of woman who seemed to belong to another time. She came with a man, never the same one twice. They thought she was lonely, or maybe cursed." I swallowed hard. "One night," he continued, "she didn't come down for breakfast. Staff went to check. They found the door locked from the inside. When they finally forced it open," he trailed off, his lips pressing thin. "She was in the bathtub, wrists cut, the water red, then cold. The man she came with was gone, disappeared, never came back for his belongings." I whispered what he hadn't said. "She killed herself." The old man's eyes darted up sharply. "That's what the papers said. That's what the police decided. But I've worked here too long to believe it." I frowned. "Then what do you think happened?" He leaned in closer, voice lowering. "She was waiting for someone. Always waiting. Each month she'd come back here like she thought he might return. The last time she realized he never would, and whatever she was holding on to, it snapped." The lobby seemed colder as he spoke. "When someone dies in anger, in grief, they don't always leave. Sometimes they stay. Sometimes they drag others with them." I shivered. "She doesn't want to be alone. That's why she calls. That's why she scratches. Every soul who listens too long, every guest who answers her, she takes them. And then they're hers." My chest tightened. "And the notes? Who's leaving them?" The old man's expression shifted, a flicker of something unreadable in his tired face. "I told you before," he said softly. "Don't ask. Don't draw her in." I almost argued, but the look in his eyes silenced me. Fear, not just of her, but of whoever else might be tangled in this. The rest of the day was a blur. The storm raged on, keeping me prisoner. The road outside was a torrent of water, carrying branches, even whole sections of fencing downstream. Escape was impossible. By evening, dread sank its claws into me again. Night was coming. Back in my room, I sat at the desk with the lamp turned low, too restless to lie down. I kept glancing at the wall, half expecting the plaster to split open again. The gouges from the night before were still there, 4 deep scratches that no one else seemed willing to acknowledge. Around midnight, the knocking started. Not from the hall this time, not from the wall, from the bathroom. Slow, deliberate taps against the mirror. I froze. The sound echoed sharp in the silence, 3 steady raps, as though someone were knocking from the other side of the glass. Gathering what little courage I had left, I edged toward the bathroom. The light flickered as I switched it on. The mirror was fogged, though the air wasn't warm. My reflection stared back at me, pale and wide-eyed. And then letters began to appear in the condensation, one by one, as though traced by an unseen finger. Help me. My breath caught. The letters smeared, then changed, the words twisting under that invisible hand. Stay with me. I stumbled back, heart hammering. The mirror pulsed faintly as though something pressed against the glass from the other side. Her voice came then, soft, coaxing, almost tender. You understand me. Don't leave me here. Please. Please, just open the door. Tears stung my eyes. There was so much pain in her voice, so much grief. For a heartbeat, I wanted to answer, to tell her I believed her, to tell her she wasn't alone. But the note burned in my memory. Don't listen to her. I squeezed my hands into fists, whispering through clenched teeth, "You're not real." The whisper stopped. For a moment, the silence was almost worse. Then the mirror cracked. A jagged line split down the center. Shards trembled, but didn't fall. From that crack came the faintest sound, like breathing, wet, rattling, inhuman. I fled the bathroom, slamming the door behind me. I tried not to sleep, but exhaustion is cruel. Somewhere in the dark hours, it pulled me under. I dreamed I was standing in the hallway outside room 6. The chains were gone. The door hung open just a few inches, and from the darkness inside, a woman's voice whispered my name. When I woke, my room was freezing. My breath puffed white in the air. And at the foot of my bed, the blanket shifted, slowly, as though someone were crawling beneath it. I choked back a scream. The shape slithered closer, rising, forming the outline of a slender figure. The blanket collapsed. Empty. But the indentation remained, 2 deep hollows, as though knees had pressed into the mattress. I bolted upright, fumbling for the lamp, and that was when I saw her. Not in the room, in the mirror, across from the bed. A woman with pale skin and dark dripping hair, her eyes black voids, her lips moving in silence. She stood where my reflection should have been, and she was smiling. When dawn finally came, I was still sitting frozen on the bed, staring at the mirror, waiting for her to vanish. But the cracks remained in the glass. The proof was still there. I knew then what the old man hadn't said. Evelyn didn't just want company. She wanted someone to take her place. And she had chosen me. The storm had not relented. Rain pelted the windows so hard it sounded like nails on metal. Thunder rolled across the sky, deep and resonant, shaking the hotel's very bones. By mid-afternoon, I had stopped trying to leave my room. Every time I approached the hallway, shadows seemed to stretch toward me, whispering promises I didn't want to hear. I knew she was in the walls, in the floor, in the air itself. The first sign was settle, a flicker at the corner of my vision, movement that wasn't there, a shadow that lingered too long, like it was watching me. I told myself it was exhaustion, the storm, my imagination, but deep down, I knew better. By evening, her presence grew bolder. It began in the mirror. Not the bathroom mirror this time, but the full-length one by the closet. My reflection blinked, or rather, it seemed to blink slightly later than I did, as if it were a frame behind reality. Then the whisper came, "Let me in." I froze. The words weren't angry, not yet, just soft, persuasive, as if she were offering comfort. I shook my head. "No," I said aloud, my voice trembling. "Not you, not now." The reflection smiled. Not me, not human. Pale lips curling, dark hair dripping across her face, eyes black as empty wells. She leaned forward, pressing her hand against the glass from the other side. The mirror trembled beneath her touch. I staggered back, tripping over the chair I'd moved earlier. And that was when I felt it. The first pull. A tug inside my chest, subtle at first, a sensation like cold fingers curling around my heart, squeezing. I gasped, clutching at my rib cage. The air felt heavier, thicker, as if she had entered the space between my lungs. No, no, not now. But she was persistent. Every time I blinked, I saw her in the corners of my vision, standing behind the chair, behind the bed, outside the window. Every reflection, every polished surface held her image. She whispered my name, promised warmth, promised safety, promised that if I let her in, it would all be over. And then the dreams started. At first, just flashes, visions of room 6, blood pooling across the floor, her lifeless body in the bathtub, water turning red, shadows moving along the walls, shapes crouched in corners. But soon, the dreams became more than visions. I was inside them. I could feel her hands brushing my arms, cold and wet, hear her voice right next to my ear. "It's easier if you stop fighting. Let me in." I woke screaming the first night. By the second, I didn't scream. My voice wouldn't work. My body felt heavy, sluggish, like I was submerged in water. My reflection in the bathroom mirror grinned at me. Not me, her. "Why fight?" she whispered. "You're already mine." I tried leaving the room. The hallway stretched infinitely. No matter which direction I ran, I ended up in front of room 6. The door was slightly ajar, dark as night, and inside a soft, rhythmic whisper, "Come in, come to me." I wanted to scream again, but no sound came out. Her influence grew stronger with each passing hour. I would wake to find myself standing by the door, hand on the knob, heart racing, but not knowing why I was there. My mind felt foggy, thoughts slipping away like water through my fingers. I tried resisting. I focused on my breathing, on counting numbers, on anything that might anchor me to myself. But she was patient. She had time, and I had nowhere to run. By the third night, it became impossible to tell where I ended and she began. I would see my reflection and notice her eyes staring back instead of mine. My own hands sometimes twitched as if moved by someone else, and the whisper had become constant, a soft, insistent hum that filled every corner of the room. "Open the door. Let me in. We belong together." I covered my ears, shouted, cried, but the sound didn't stop. She had found a way inside me, threading her voice into my own thoughts. I realized then that she didn't just want me to open the door physically. She wanted the barrier inside me to fall. She wanted my mind, my body, my soul. Desperation clawed at me. I thought of the old man, of his warnings, of the stories of guests who never left. I tried grounding myself, touch the floor, feel the chair, grip the desk. She pushed back. Every time I focused, shadows stretched longer, whispers grew louder. She mocked my attempts to remain separate. And then came the touch. Not cold, not ghostly, but inside me. A prickling sensation crawling along my skin, like tiny needles pressing under my flesh. I jerked, trying to run, but I couldn't move fast enough. She laughed, a sound like wind through dead leaves, hollow and cruel. "You're mine," she said. "We've been waiting for you." I slumped against the bed, trembling. My reflection leaned toward me in the mirror. Her lips moved with mine even when I didn't move. My own voice echoed hers. I understood then. Resistance was futile. And yet, somewhere inside, a small spark of self remained. A desperate, fragile ember that refused to extinguish. I focused on it, clinging to it like a lifeline. Every whisper, every pull, I countered with thought, will, memory, anything of me that still existed. Hours passed like centuries. Exhaustion pushed me to the edge of collapse. My thoughts swirled, tangled with hers, but I clung to one truth. If I could survive until the storm ended, until daylight, perhaps I could still escape. And then, just before dawn, I heard the old man's voice in the lobby. "You can't fight her alone." Something about it pierced the fog in my mind. Not salvation, not yet, but a reminder. The hotel was alive, yes, but so was I. I resolved then that I wouldn't let her fully claim me. Not tonight. Not until I understood what she wanted and how far I'd have to go to survive. I had barely slept, though I don't know how I could call it sleep. My body was heavy, my mind frayed, and the whispers never stopped. They swirled in my ears like smoke, sometimes soft, sometimes insistent. "You belong here. You understand me." The storm had begun to ease, but the hotel remained an oppressive fortress of shadows. The hallway outside my room stretched endlessly, darker than night should allow, and the air smelled faintly of decay, old carpet, and something metallic I couldn't identify. I kept my hand on the wall as I walked, feeling the rough paint beneath my fingers, trying to anchor myself to the reality I still clung to. I knew I couldn't stay locked in my room forever. If Evelyn wanted me, she could reach me there anyway. I had to understand her. So, despite the lingering dread, I stepped out. Every creak of the floorboards under my feet made my heart jump, as if the hotel itself were alert to my movements. The lobby was empty. The old man wasn't at the desk, but his papers and half-drunk cup of coffee remained. Dust motes floated in the dim light from the storm-darkened windows, making the room feel frozen in time. A folder lay on the corner of the desk, one I hadn't noticed before. I opened it. Inside were photographs and documents dating back decades, faded images of the hotel's staff, black and white snapshots of parties long forgotten, newspaper clippings about disappearances and murders. Each photo seemed to whisper of lives interrupted, of laughter that had turned into screams. At the center of the folder was a page titled simply Room 6. It detailed every known incident, guests who vanished, staff who quit in terror, police investigations that ended without answers. Most chilling was the recurring detail: every incident involved one constant, the woman who would later be called Evelyn. I flipped through the folder, unable to look away. Each report was more disturbing than the last. Guests who screamed about being watched, objects moving on their own, lights flickering, shadows shifting. In every case, the witnesses described her, sometimes as a woman, sometimes as a shadow, sometimes only by the feeling of being watched. And then there were notes scrawled in the margins by hotel staff. One read, "She waits in the room, but she is not alone. She takes them. She always takes them. We can't stop her." My heart pounded. I realized the truth slowly, like a door creaking open in my mind. Evelyn wasn't just a ghost. She was a force tied to the hotel itself, a predator that fed on the living. And the hotel, it helped her. I turned as a noise made me jump, a soft, deliberate click, like heels against the old wooden floor. She was standing at the end of the hallway. Not fully human, not fully shadow. Pale, dark hair hanging in wet strands, eyes black and bottomless, but she was smiling. A gentle, terrifying smile. "I see you found my history," she whispered. I froze. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I couldn't move. Not yet. "You are curious," she said, her voice soft and honeyed. "And curiosity always costs." I swallowed hard. What are you?" She tilted her head like a child considering a puzzle. "I am what the hotel needs. I am what it feeds on. I am what stays behind when others leave." Her smile widened, and I noticed the hallway seemed to warp around her. The walls stretched and bent, impossibly long, impossibly dark. The air vibrated with a low hum, like the building itself was alive, resonating with her presence. I don't understand," I whispered. She moved closer, slowly, deliberately. Her steps made no sound, yet the floorboards beneath me creaked with every heartbeat. The shadows around her seemed to shift, thickening, curling toward her like smoke drawn to a fire. "Long ago," she said, "I was a guest. I came here like you. But the hotel, it claimed me, and now I belong to it. But not completely. I am tethered to it, but I am free to take, and I take." I wanted to run, but my legs refused. Something about her presence rooted me in place. "Take who?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Those who resist, those who fight, those who watch too long, those who see me more than a shadow. They are mine, and they become part of the hotel, part of the collection." I realized then what the old man had tried to warn me. Every story, every guest who disappeared was part of her growing power. And now I was at risk. She reached out, just a hand's width from my face. Cold seeped into my skin, not like ice, but deeper, through bones, into the marrow. "You are strong," she said, almost approvingly. "Stronger than most. But strong does not save you. Will does not save you. The hotel decides. And I choose." I stumbled backward, heart hammering, desperate to put distance between us. But as I did, the walls seemed to stretch again. Doorways led to nowhere. Hallways twisted impossibly. I realized the hotel itself was bending reality, and she was its center. I clutched the folder from the desk, my only thought. Knowledge is power. Understanding her history might be my only chance. I leafed through more clippings, noticing a pattern. Guests who had survived certain nights had left clues, small, subtle things, like arranging furniture a certain way, or refusing to sleep in room 6. The hotel seemed to punish those who weren't careful. Evelyn's influence grew strongest in those who tried to uncover her truth without understanding it fully. She smiled at me again, fading slightly like mist retreating. "You will sleep tonight, and when you wake, we will be closer." And then she was gone. The hallway was silent, normal again, as if nothing had happened. Only the folder remained in my hands. I knew what I had to do. I needed more information, more history. The hotel had secrets buried in old records, diaries, newspapers, everything that could tell me how guests had survived before, if anyone had. I had to uncover the rules, the patterns, anything. Because if I didn't, I realized with a sickening clarity, I would become part of the hotel too. Part of the whispers, part of the shadows, part of the collection. And then she would smile when the next guest arrived. Sleep never truly came that night. The narrow hotel bed felt more like a trap than a resting place, pressing down on me with the weight of 1,000 unseen eyes. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw shadows slithering along the walls, twisting into impossible shapes, and I could almost hear them whispering my name. The softest hiss, "You cannot hide, you cannot leave," reverberated in my skull. My body trembled, but I knew I had no choice. I had to confront Evelyn, or this hotel would claim me completely. The folder lay on the bed beside me, pages crinkled from trembling fingers and damp from the sweat of fear. I flipped through it again, rereading the photographs, newspaper clippings, and staff notes. Patterns emerged. The missing guests had all left subtle signs, small ways to survive the night, and every clue pointed to a single truth. Everything revolved around room 6. This wasn't merely a room, it was a portal, a funnel through which Evelyn extended her power, reaching into the minds and bodies of her victims. I stood and took a deep, steadying breath. My hands were clammy, my legs heavy, but I had to move. Every instinct screamed at me to flee, but running was useless. Evelyn could reach anywhere, and the hotel itself bent to her will. I stepped into the hallway, my shoes whispering against the old floorboards, each creak a reminder that the building was alive, listening. The air was thick, heavy with a scent I could not place. Part mildew, part rusted metal, part something rotten beneath it all. The hallway stretched endlessly, the dim light from broken sconces casting long, twisting shadows that seemed to slither toward me. And at the end of that hallway, there it was, room 6. Ordinary, unassuming in appearance, but impossibly menacing. The chain across the door rattled softly like a warning, and the temperature dropped sharply, frosting my breath in the cold air. I swallowed hard. I have to face this. I have to understand it, or I'll never leave, I whispered to myself. The moment I touched the doorknob, the hallway seemed to stretch impossibly long. The lights flickered violently, casting strobe-like shadows along the walls. I felt her presence behind me before I saw her, a cold, watching sensation pressing against my spine. I turned slowly, expecting to see her, but only the darkness stared back. I twisted the knob. The door creaked open, groaning as if it had been waiting decades for me. Darkness poured out like black water, swallowing the hallway's weak morning light. A putrid, metallic smell surged, curling my stomach. I stepped inside cautiously, holding the folder before me like a shield, even though I knew it offered no real protection. The room seemed ordinary at first glance. Furniture draped in white sheets, thick dust covering every surface. A single narrow window let in a sliver of gray light, illuminating particles of dust dancing in the air. But the air itself was oppressive, heavy, almost viscous, making it feel as if each breath required effort. And then I heard it, a whisper so soft it almost dissolved into the air. "You shouldn't be here." Evelyn emerged from the shadows. At first I saw only a flicker, a darkness at the far wall, but she slowly coalesced it into form. Pale skin, wet strands of black hair clinging to her face, eyes deep and void-like. Her smile was slow, deliberate, and terrifying, as if she were savoring a secret only I could not yet grasp. "You came to understand," she murmured, her voice echoing, bouncing off the warped walls. "I know enough," I replied, trying to steady my quivering voice, "and I'm not leaving without trying." Her smile widened, and the shadows in the room thickened, swirling around her like smoke animated by her will. "Brave or foolish? Let's see," she hissed. The room changed in an instant. The walls stretched upward into impossible heights, twisting and bending as if the building itself were alive. The furniture warped grotesquely, chairs elongated, tables bent into sharp angles, and the air vibrated with a low, oppressive hum. My stomach churned as I realized that the hotel itself had joined her, amplifying her power, testing me, suffocating me. I clutched the folder tighter and read aloud a line scrawled by the hotel staff. "The light reveals her weakness. Do not fear what is behind you. Face her, and the room will obey you." At that, the shadows recoiled slightly, and a thin column of light emerged in the corner of the room. It pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat, and instinct drew me toward it. My legs shook violently, but I moved, repeating the staff's advice in my mind. "Face her, and the room will obey you." Evelyn advanced, her form blurred and stretched, sometimes human, sometimes monstrous, sometimes only shadow and shape. Cold radiated from her, seeping into my bones, trying to freeze me in place. The whispers swelled, circling my head, filling my ears with terror and doubt. "You are weak. You will fail. Belong to me." I pressed on. The folder felt heavier now, as though it absorbed the tension in the room. The light corner grew brighter, but the shadows lashed out with long, spindly tendrils, reaching, clawing, trying to drag me back into darkness. Evelyn's face twisted in anger, the smile splitting her features unnaturally. "You cannot stop me. The hotel and I, we are eternal." Fear clawed at me, but I forced myself to speak, louder this time, shaking. "I will not let you win." The light flared suddenly, strong and piercing, and the shadows hissed, recoiling from it as though burned. Evelyn screamed, a sound that was half human, half shadow, chilling me to the core. For the first time, I felt her power falter, even if only slightly. The room shuddered violently. Dust and broken plaster fell from the ceiling. The floor heaved beneath my feet, threatening to swallow me. But I kept moving toward the light, focusing on the one thing that had given previous guests a chance, confronting her. The folder was my anchor, the words of the staff my guide, and the column of light my weapon. Evelyn shrieked, twisting in anger and frustration, yet the shadows shrank, curling back toward the corners of the room. For the first time, I realized survival wasn't just about courage, it was about understanding, about confronting the terror fully, refusing to give in to fear, and using the tools left behind by those who had faced her before. I gripped the folder tighter, bracing myself. Evelyn might fight back with everything the hotel could muster, but I had found a crack, a weakness, and I would not surrender, not tonight. The column of light pulsed faintly before me, a fragile beacon against the suffocating darkness. I had faced Evelyn and survived, barely, but I knew this wasn't over. The hotel's heartbeat throbbed through the floor, walls, and ceiling, each pulse a warning that it would not release me willingly. I took a hesitant step forward, gripping the folder tightly. Pages rattled in my hands as if sharing a secret, whispering what I needed to know. I flipped to a photograph of a woman in the lobby, smiling. On the back, scribbled hastily, were the words, "She is not what she seems. The hotel feeds. It grows. It never stops." I shivered, reading and rereading the sentence. Evelyn wasn't just a ghost, a spirit, or a remnant of someone long dead. She was the hotel. Or at least, she had merged with it so completely that she had become something else entirely. Something that could twist reality, trap minds, and turn walls and floors into instruments of fear. A sudden noise made me freeze. The door to room 6 slammed shut behind me with a deafening crash, and the shadows twisted violently, forming shapes I couldn't comprehend. I felt like I was standing inside a living nightmare, one that fed on every hesitation, every shiver of fear. The whispers returned, louder this time, a chorus of voices echoing from the walls. "You cannot know. You cannot leave. She is eternal." And then I saw her. Evelyn emerged from a corner, her form more monstrous than before. Her hair hung in damp clumps around her face, eyes black as voids, skin pale and almost translucent. Shadows swirled around her like a storm, flaring in response to my fear. "You are learning," she said, her voice both soft and thunderous, bouncing from the warped walls. "But do you understand?" I swallowed hard. My hands shook, but I forced myself to open the folder and read more of the notes from the staff. One message stood out. "The hotel remembers. It traps pieces of every person who enters. They linger, shadows of their former selves. Light, memory, and willpower can fight it, but only briefly." Shadows flickered along the walls, taking on forms I recognized, past guests, twisted versions of people who had stayed in room 6. I could see their fear, their horror, their attempts to flee, all frozen in the warped reality of the hotel. I realized with a sick feeling that these weren't just memories, they were trapped, fragments of consciousness feeding Evelyn, fueling her power. "You see?" she whispered, moving closer, each step bending the floor slightly under her weight. "You are already part of it. You will join them, and I will remember everything you've felt, everything you've feared."
"No!" I shouted, raising the folder. "I refuse!" The room shuddered violently. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the floor twisted as though it had been liquid moments before. Shadows lunged at me, clawing and scraping, trying to pull me down into the warped floorboards. But I forced myself to focus on the one thing the staff had emphasized: the light. I moved toward the sliver of light in the corner, holding the folder high. As I stepped closer, the shadows shrieked and recoiled, hissing like snakes disturbed. Evelyn screamed, a sound that made the air vibrate and my teeth ache, but I pressed forward. Then I understood. The hotel didn't just feed on fear. It lived off attention and recognition. The more you saw, the more you understood, the more power it could draw from you. But that also meant awareness could be used against it. The light, combined with knowledge and defiance, was a weapon. I gripped the folder tighter, forcing my mind to recall every detail I had gathered. Newspaper clippings, staff notes, photographs, even the whispers of past guests. I recited them aloud, letting the words form a barrier of memory, awareness, and will. The shadows shrieked, twisting and writhing, but they could not stop me. Evelyn's form flared, stretching and collapsing, the air thick with the smell of decay and rust. For a moment, I saw the human part of her, the woman she must have been before merging with the hotel, eyes wide with anguish, a flicker of recognition and sorrow in her expression. You are trying to fight me," she said, voice quivering now. "But I am eternal. I cannot be destroyed." "Maybe not destroyed," I said, voice steadying, "but you can be contained. You can be resisted." I stepped fully into the light, and the shadows screamed. Evelyn's form began to fracture, twisting in impossible ways, writhing as though the hotel itself were in pain. I realized then that the key wasn't defeating her entirely, it was surviving her long enough to leave, to break the cycle of submission, to exist beyond her control. The hotel could trap pieces of you, but your will, your memory, your awareness, that was something it could never fully claim unless you surrendered. Evelyn's scream was deafening now, shaking the walls, pulling at my mind. The floor buckled beneath my feet, but I stood firm, reciting the notes from the folder, focusing on every fragment of knowledge I had acquired. The light flared brighter, and the shadows twisted, shrieking in fury, retreating toward the corners and edges of the room. For the first time, I felt control. Not over Evelyn, not over the hotel, but over myself. I could breathe again. I could move, and I could escape. The room continued to tremble, and Evelyn's form slowly began to dissipate, retreating into the walls, ceiling, and floor. She whispered one final warning, soft, almost human. "You can leave, for now, but I will remember, and I will wait." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I had survived, and for the first time in weeks, the air felt normal again. The light remained faint, a steady reminder that awareness, courage, and focus could give you a chance, even in the face of a horror as vast as the hotel and Evelyn herself. I backed toward the door, each step careful but determined. The hallway beyond room 6 looked normal once more, the shadows receding, the air warming slightly. I clutched the folder, already planning my escape, already thinking about how to leave the hotel behind and how to warn others if I could. But even as I walked toward the lobby, a shiver ran down my spine. Somewhere deep inside the walls, I could feel her presence lingering, patient, waiting, eternal. And I knew one thing for certain. The hotel would never truly let anyone go. Not completely. The hallway stretched before me like a tunnel of uncertainty. Each step echoed through the quiet hotel, but the silence felt unnatural, charged.
as if the building itself were holding its breath. Room 6 loomed behind me, its door now closed, seemingly ordinary, but I knew better. Behind that innocuous barrier, Evelyn still waited, hidden within the walls, the floors, and every shadow. My legs felt heavy, yet I forced myself onward. I clutched the folder, the crumpled pages now a talisman of survival, each note and photograph a reminder of what I had learned. The air smelled faintly of damp plaster and decay, lingering even outside room 6. It was the hotel's way of reminding me that it had been alive, aware, and ready to strike again. I paused near the end of the hallway, glancing toward the grand staircase that led to the lobby. The flickering lights revealed nothing unusual at first, but then I noticed movement. A shadow, sharper and more angular than any normal darkness, darted across the floor and vanished. My pulse quickened. Evelyn was testing me, probing, waiting for me to falter. I forced myself to breathe slowly, counting each inhale and exhale, grounding myself in the reality that remained. "You won't get me," I whispered under my breath. "Not again. Not here. Not tonight." The lobby came into view, dimly lit but eerily familiar. Dust-covered furniture, tattered curtains, and cracked tiles made the place feel frozen in time, yet a strange energy vibrated beneath it all. I could sense the echoes of every guest who had ever stayed here, their fear, despair, and confusion embedded in the walls. And then I saw her. Evelyn appeared at the far end of the lobby, her form shifting unnaturally. For a brief moment, she looked human, haunted, pale, and sorrowful, but then the shadows behind her twisted violently, stretching like claws across the floor, walls, and ceiling. Her voice echoed, layered, and distorted, bouncing around the room. "You cannot leave. This hotel, we are eternal." I shook my head, forcing my fear down. "No, you're not eternal if I survive," I shouted, my voice echoing back at me like a promise. The shadows surged toward me, lashing at my legs, the heels of my shoes scraping against the tiles. I jumped back, gripping the folder like a shield. "I won't let you trap me." Evelyn's form dissolved into pure darkness, rising like smoke, then coalesced again into the figure of the woman from the old photograph, her eyes void-like, locked onto mine. "You all who enter, all who fear, become part of me. And you are mine." But I had learned her weakness, awareness, memory, and defiance. I forced myself to remember everything from the folder, reciting it aloud. Newspaper clippings, staff notes, and warnings from past guests. The words acted like a barrier, a fragile shield against her power. Shadows recoiled slightly, twisting and writhing, unable to reach me fully. I ran. My steps echoed, bouncing off walls that seemed to stretch, twisting and bending with each motion. The lobby warped around me, yet the light from the distant exit cut through, faint but steady. I could see the front doors, their brass handles gleaming under the weak sunlight that filtered in through grimy windows. Freedom was there, just ahead. The shadows surged again, faster this time. They snaked along the floor and ceiling, trying to trap me in a web of darkness. Evelyn screamed, a sound that made the air vibrate and my teeth ache. But I pressed on, repeating the knowledge, the names, the warnings aloud, letting the sound itself act as a weapon. I reached the grand staircase, The steps groaned under my weight, warped into jagged angles, but I climbed anyway. The walls seemed to stretch endlessly, the ceiling curving impossibly above me, but I focused on one step at a time. Every shadow that lunged at me dissolved when it touched the light, hissing like a broken creature. As I neared the top of the stairs, I realized something terrifying. The hotel wasn't just trying to stop me physically, it was attempting to trap my mind. Hallways looped impossibly, staircases doubled back, and doors that should have led outside only led to other rooms, all distorted by Evelyn's influence. I stopped, gasping for breath. Panic clawed at my chest. Think, I told myself. Awareness. Remember what is real. Trust what you know. I pictured the front door, the brass handles, the sunlight, and the cool wind outside. I focused on the sensation of stepping beyond the threshold, leaving this nightmare behind me. Slowly, step by step, hallway by hallway, I forced the path to make sense, ignoring the warped illusions. Evelyn's whispers grew louder, insidious, circling my mind. You cannot escape. You are mine. You will stay. But I clenched my teeth, repeating each detail I knew about her and the hotel. Knowledge became my anchor, defiance my sword. At last, I reached the final hallway leading to the lobby doors. Sunlight poured in through the grimy glass, washing the dark marble tiles in warmth. I felt Evelyn's presence behind me, coiling like a living thing, but I stepped forward anyway. The doors loomed ahead. I grasped the handles, icy but real, and pulled. They resisted at first, heavy as if the hotel itself were holding them closed, but I yanked harder, and they swung open. Sunlight exploded into the lobby, cutting through the shadows like fire. I stumbled outside, the warm air hitting my face, my lungs finally filling with real, living air. The hotel loomed behind me, silent for the first time, yet still ominous. I didn't stop running, leaving the cobblestone street, the distant traffic, and the ordinary world behind me. Even as I put distance between myself and the cursed building, a chill ran down my spine. I knew she was still inside, Evelyn, part of the hotel, waiting, patient, eternal. And though I had escaped, I understood a terrifying truth. She never truly let anyone go, not fully. I looked back once, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw a shadowy figure in the top window of room 6, watching, waiting. My heart lurched, but then it vanished, like smoke blown by the wind. I clutched the folder tighter. I had survived. I had escaped, but I also knew that the story of room 6 and of Evelyn was far from over. The hotel remained, silent and alive, ready to trap the next visitor who dared to enter, and someday I might have to return, armed with memory, knowledge, and courage, to face her again. For now, though, I was free. The sun was real, the air was real, and the horrors behind the hotel doors were trapped, for the moment.